Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thicc Radio, the gaming podcast where we talk about gaming and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim. Let's get into it. Today, we're joined by a special guest. You know them, you love them. It's Dino.
Yeah.
Hello, hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm great. I'm actually good. I'm so happy they've finally opened gyms again. And that's all I care about right now. But yeah, I'm feeling good. High energy. Shit's getting back to normal.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Good. We're good. And listen, touching on that, in timeline listeners, when this episode comes out, when we record this, lockdown in the UK only eased, 2 days ago now, is it?
Yeah, something like that. It's fresh.
So shit's going crazy. But there's no spike in admissions, and we will continue thoughts and prayers and fingers crossed.
Yeah. Hope.
But no, I'm otherwise good. I'm good. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Over here, lockdown is kind of whenever they feel like it. Like some businesses are locked down, some are not. Like everything's open except banks. I don't know what's going on anymore. We just kind of flip on the news every day and we're like, oh, okay, things aren't getting any better. So, all right, let's just go to work. Like, there's not much else you could do.
Yeah.
So, Dino, we brought you in today for a very special reason because you and I have known each other for a long time, and you are this quintessential being in my mind who straddles this fantastic line of masculinity and femininity, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Is
love it, yeah,
all
I appreciate that. No, I'm excited. It's one of my favorite fucking aspects of life and states of being a human. It's complex, it's beautiful. Yeah, let's unravel it.
Cool. I mean, listen, just to kick things off, viewers, I say viewers, listeners, you can't see, but Dino is actually Greek Cypriot, which, gorge factor aside, has to beg question number one. How does masculinity play into the expectations people have of you from family, from partners, and from the Greek Cypriot culture?
Yeah, I mean, like, first and foremost, I find like a lot of Mediterranean cultures have this weird contrast between their men not being afraid of their own like flair, of their own peacockness, if you will, which is quite, flamboyant in its nature, but then also having this like strict hatred and shame, so much shame. Like, my God, especially the Greeks, they're just full of shame and like guilt, and that's just what they thrive on. But I mean, I've always been able to dodge the suspicions young, because I don't know, I was just more laddish, I guess, and a lot of Mediterranean parents will just happily be like in the blind about it, sort of denial. But it's just interesting, like my nan, super Cypriot Orthodox, as Greek as they come, tiny little village. I'm not necessarily out with her, but we had a very interesting conversation, and it was very much like watching some lady on TV, like an advert, and she asking me if I find her attractive, and then I'm like, no, Nan, and then she's like, do you have a girlfriend? I'm like, no, and you can tell that's what she's talking about right now, and then she just looks at me straight in the eye, and she was just like, if you're a naughty boy, I won't love you anymore. Just like that's how she said it, her exact words, in her own little broken English way. And I was like, don't worry, Nan, I'm not a naughty boy, clearly understanding what she was, meant. But it's never stopped me from kind of just being me. And I think a lot of that comes from shamelessness, I think, is my weird power, if you will.
I definitely agree with that, knowing you as a person. If there's one thing you are, it is gobsmackingly inspirational in how you will just put yourself out there, put yourself in a situation, and just be like, and what? I'm
And
here.
we've talked before about how liberating yourself from shame is something that we're all striving for. Some of us come to it sooner than others, but I mean, being able to be liberated from those feelings of, should I do this? Do I want to do this? Is it people are going to freak out? When you finally get past all of that, it's like all these doors just open for you.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting though, because I think a lot of cultures from all over the world have this like, and I think it's mixed with like religion and tradition in general, has this uncertainty about gays and gay culture because it's counterculture basically at its purest form. It is going against reproducing, which is like, the definition of life, if you want to look at it that way, the means of survival, of continuing the chain. That is, so I totally understand how it could be so foreign to a lot of people, but I think that's what it stems from: shame. When someone feels those feelings, it's instantly shameful. But that's just where I've like, I don't know, I just maybe wasn't born with it. It just never really clicked in my head. I would just always strive to answer things a bit differently and a bit more real and raw, because I wasn't afraid or ashamed of that inner core that I just kept like spilling all over the place.
I want to query, because you and I have had this discussion a few times about that sort of masculine aspect of self and this like feminine freedom, this natural sense of like womanness that is like somehow like the personhood. I want to ask you, how do you feel like you engage with femininity the most? Do you feel like you do that with clothes, with your attitude, with your like passions and the things you like give money to? Like, what is it for you that you do that with?
Well, I think like the older I get, the more things just fall under that list.
Yeah.
Because I've just learned to just like, when I'm having the most fun is when I'm being the most feminine, as weird as that sounds. But that's how it is for me. I'm just batshit crazy, and it's like it's more freeing in a way. And I think that's just because of the state that the world is now. It's like my music, not necessarily now, but genuinely I'm in a loud color, not giving a fuck. Like I live in North London, which personally I think is like the least queer part of London. There's definitely shit that goes down, but it's less like flamboyant and flary as like, for example, South London. If you don't know, like South London is big gay scene, like the complete opposite of North London. Yeah, I've never really been afraid of just being as faggy as possible in so many situations. Yeah.
I guess probably the one place where I sort of experiment with my femininity. That's such a hard word to get out.
Yeah, it is.
Femininity. Is probably with the special effects makeup. I think that might be the one place where I did that, because like, so I sculpted a fake heart. I made a cast of it, and then I basically made a fake heart out of gelatin. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? And I thought, okay, what if I do like an evil queen, quote unquote, look with it? So like I, painted my face white, did the white powder, put on like heavy eyeliner and mascara, and then I made it all run down my face. Like it was, like I was brokenhearted or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I took a bunch of pictures of me holding this heart dripping in fake blood with this makeup on. It was a very feminine look, but I really loved how it turned out. Like, so that's probably the one place where I've sort of experimented with it. I would say that when I was much more of like the Twinkie body style, some of the clothing choices that I would make would kind of not necessarily girls' clothes, but like they had a more feminine flair to them.
Of course. Yeah. I see that.
It's quite... and sorry, Dino, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, it's funny how like our bodies do have this instant connection to how necessarily we're feeling. Because that's the thing about masculine and feminine, is not only are they concepts or structures, but they're also feelings. You can feel feminine, you can feel masculine. And I think, yeah, having the body to match that, it's all about getting in the mindset and just expression, really. Yeah.
And listen, to put it out there as well for the people who haven't seen, Dino is also a muscle gainer, and a mighty fine looking muscle gainer out there to put on the his Grommr, which we will promo at the end of the episode. But Dino, you're a muscle gainer. I'm curious to know from your perspective, how does your engagement with femininity contrast with the way that you're perceived and the partners that you want to attract?
Well, I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Because I want to gain muscle, I want to be huge, I want to be ridiculous, and that is not a feminine thing, as as far as kind of like the normalized idea of what femininity and masculinity is. So it is a strange contrast, and I have noticed like I thought like you can fall into so many niches as a person without even really trying or realizing it. And like I've been with guys that like the fact that I look really masculine, but can be their sub little bitch boy with the boy pussy, and it is those two crazy separate worlds being attached by this just want to fuck each other. And it's very strange, and it's like beautiful in a way as well. But I have found it difficult because I do upfront say shit like masculine and feminine, like I will give you both in so many ways, because I personally love people, and I love looking into why people do the things they do, and that's what really interests me and drives me as a person. So like when I fuck guys, we have like a good fucking chat afterwards nearly all the time, and I love that. That's almost as good as sex, almost. And I just love like really listening and just giving this person the time and learning who they are. And like I have this very non-judgmental way about me when I do speak to people, and I think it helps them open up more. And I've just heard such crazy like different ways people live their lives and different ways they handle the masculine and feminine parts of their life. And I think that's the thing. Everyone has both, whether they want to admit it or not. And I think the men that are mass for mask, it is, well, that stems from like why we find masculinity attractive, but that like more on that layer. The point now is more just, I've found once people got to know me, they find me more attractive. And I feel like with mass for mask, that sort of aspect doesn't exist, but it's a tricky one. I mean, dating's strange.
It's hard for everybody, regardless of your situation.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
It's you said a line which I think really resonates with me, and I would imagine it would do so with listeners. Everyone's got masculine and feminine in them, whether they like it or not. And I think that is straight up it. We talked about this a little bit on the episode, speaking with Hudson about the asexuality spectrum with the genderbread person. A lot of people present this idea of like a one-line spectrum where you've got man at one end, woman at the other, and then it's in the middle. And even though the word is androgen, for some reason people like to go, oh, we don't know what that is. And
right.
But actually it's multiple spectrums simultaneously. And maybe on one spectrum, we're all man. And maybe on another spectrum, we are all woman. And maybe on the infinite number of other spectrums, we're somewhere magically in between. And it's not about aggregating the data and coming out with an average score. Maybe it's about acknowledging that we just are all of those things. So I think that's really hitting the nail on the head. And maybe if certain people understood that there were naturally feminine aspects to everyone and vice versa with masculine, maybe we wouldn't have so many judgmental problems in our communities.
Yeah, for sure.
But, you know, speaking of communities, we're a gaming podcast. We're talking about the body growth, the transformation.
Yes.
How much do we believe that our literal transformation affects the way that we perceive ourselves in a masculine and feminine way, and the way that we present in a masculine feminine way? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so like, I think most people just don't know what they're doing in life. They just don't. They're happy to be alive, they're loving life, they're moving forward. But there's, you know, a lot of people are goalless, not just in their, you know, career or whatnot, but goalless in who they are and who they are becoming. And what most people do is they just latch on to the groups and they just see how other people are doing it, and they use that to decide what they want to do and also how well they're doing at it as well. So a lot of the time it's like me gaining, it fuels me on so many other levels. It makes me feel powerful and feel masculine as I'm building muscle, but at the same time it really turns me on, which turns me into a little bit of a bitch boy because I want to be donned the fuck out of. So it's like at the same time I'm fueling both, and that's my path. But other people, whilst they're living their path and living their journey and their body journey, they will, you know, experience the changes and physically, and what it deals with them mentally very differently. And I think the more sound you are with yourself, the healthier that journey will be. Healthier, if less damaging to oneself, basically.
I get that.
And yeah, I think there's a lot of beauty that can be found within the gaining culture and community, and a lot of it's body stuff, and I love it.
For me, it's been kind of an interesting progression, because like pre-gaining, when I had that Twinkie body style, like I said, some of my clothing choices might have had a more feminine flair, and I kind of took the passive role in most of the relationships that I was in. Even friendships, I had more of a passive role. Not that is indicative of a feminine personality, but just that I felt kind of like I was being lumped into a certain category because I was skinny. I'm tall, but I'm not the tallest person. I'm 5'10", so there are people that are much taller than I am. I feel like I got sorted into the elf house. Like, does that make sense? Like if I were a D&D character at that time, they would have made me an elf.
Yeah, I get tall, it. I totally get it.
And skinny and somewhat effeminate and, you know, very erudite. Like, that's how I felt I got classified.
Yeah.
The weight started to come on, and I began to feel more masculine as the weight came on. I began to explore my masculinity more as the weight came on. Now I feel like if you were going to classify me, I would be an orc. So...
I mean, you say that, like, I feel like maybe I'd be an orc. Bitch, we've seen the modded photo.
Yeah, that's true. I do now sort of cosplay as an orc every now and again. So, I mean, but I really love that. So, like, if this were years ago when I was still in the Twinkie phase of my life, I'd have been like, ooh, who wants to be an orc? They're ugly and they're green and they stink. And I'm like, now I'm all about, fuck yeah. Like, I want to be the badass orc that just, you know, swings the war hammer and knocks a whole troop of soldiers down. Like,
totally.
Big lug. Yeah, I feel that.
I mean, even in the way that, like, I'll play like an action game, if you get the choice of, like, would you do like a magical class or a melee class? Like, used to be I would pick magic every single time because I'm like, I want to sit out of the way on a tree branch and a magic spell and make a dude fall over. Now I'm sitting here like, where is my hammer? Let me this dude just... And I don't know, like, I don't know where that comes from. I think I might have shared this on the podcast a couple of episodes back, but there was this one time I was hooking up with a gainer friend, and this character, Chad, just came out of nowhere, where all of a sudden I was this like a university jock, total douche, you know,
Oh God, yes.
fully problematic, you know, push over the nerd and take his lunch money, just guzzles the beer and the donuts, and, you know, doesn't give a shit about anyone. And his whole thing is like, yeah, he's getting fat, but who the fuck cares? He's fucking bad. And like, I was so blown away. Me and my friend, we talked about this afterwards, and he was like, where did that come from? And I'm like, I don't know, because I had never really identified with my own sense of masculinity. I never identified or felt it because I come from a very bogan family culture.
Yes.
And I was just not that. And I would used to dream when I was a kid, like, I want to be more like that. I want to be that. I don't feel it. I don't think I am that. And now I do. And I've always believed that, you know, yes, we game because we find it sexy and it gets us off and we love it. But something in me says, you want to do this because who you are was always destined to be this bigger person. You just weren't there yet physically. And so now that I exist in a physical body that reflects the person that I know that I am, that sense of true self just wells up and comes out of me. And it's an amazing thing to feel, to be able to feel a personal connection and a validity to my sense of masculinity. It's very freeing, self-affirming, and familial in a way that I didn't know that I could feel with a part of myself. You know, I always thought that this is just who I am. I'm not a masculine guy. End of story. But turns out that story had a second book, and I'm liking how the story's going. So that's that on that.
Yeah, no, it's good. You tapped into it, and that's the thing. Like, it sounds like it on a superficial level, because all you did was change your voice and your demeanor. But on the grand spectrum, that's where most people read femininity and masculinity. So it's, you were playing the part, and yeah, you just tapped into something inside yourself, and awesome.
Well, amazing. You know, we realize more and more as well how much aspects of society are coded in gender. You know, I remember being in high school, they taught us about like cradle to grave marketing, which is literally from the moment we're born to them, even looking at like homes, like everything in our life is presented to us and it's gendered.
Planned out, yes.
It's ridiculous. There's an element in which we kind of bypass that a little bit by being in the LGBT, because it's low-key expected of us that we kind of circumnavigate that a bit. But when it comes to expressing elements of masculinity and femininity that is not expected of us, we often get negative critique from people.
Oof.
How can we best uplift ourselves and others to express themselves more comfortably?
Ooh, well, right. So what I've done, majority of my life, I've found myself in very masculine environments, like constantly, just subconsciously, my body leads me there. I've worked on a farm in rural Australia, like for a couple months, and just got down with all the country folk and all the straight traveler boys that I also worked with on a daily basis. And I've never stopped any part of my femininity, but I also know when I show my masculinity, I get a certain reaction. And like, just taking the farm, for example, these boys did not like me day one. Little fruity number walking in, shortest shorts, hottest weather, didn't even give a fuck. And I did not get a good response. Like they used to take the absolute shit out of me, chuck raw green bananas at me, and like, that shit's hard. They're like little fucking pellets. And what I did was I just like went full on masculine adapt mode, played their games, learned how to fucking throw a mean hook myself and land a few like serious pellets. And they like slowly came round to me. But throughout all of that, I never dropped my femininity. I was still the gay one, and I still gave it to them sassily. Like, I was masculine in the sense that I was a boisterous and laddish, but I was still doing it in my own faggy way. And I think that sort of duality will unlock so much for so many people, because like, it's fair enough to say you're unapologetically yourself, and you're the gay one in the office and you're flamboyant as fuck and no one can take that away from you. That's awesome. And then in their own way, they connect with the straight guys that they have to work with. And that's great as well. But with me, I almost want to speak their language and sort of translate my own little queerness in there. Because what I find is whenever you look at really masculine environments, like anytime there is like thick, dripping testosterone in the air, there's gay shit afoot. Like no matter how straight or how masculine, I know like those two core things, no matter how much it is, there's gayery just looking over the fence at all times because it's just there. It's in the air. It's like, yeah, like it makes the most sense in terms of just when there's multiple men, chances are a few of them are gonna graze a dick or two. It's just kind of how shit goes. And I think a lot of part of man culture has realized that, but a lot of part is still really shameful of that. So it kind of stems from that.
I feel that. Tim?
I think as far as uplifting and helping others feel comfortable, the Gen Z kids have really got that under control, I think. Like we've talked about this before, that the Gen Z kids are all about like, they are not taking anybody's shit. They're not putting up with any racism, transphobia, homophobia. They're not putting up with any of that crap. And within the gay community, LGBTQ people, it's the older ones. It's like actually the older millennials and the Gen Xers that are in the LGBT community that really need to get with the times. Because like I was ignorant to a lot of stuff, and like I had to get non-binary friends before I could truly understand what they were about. I had to get transgendered friends before I could truly understand what they were about. But I was open to that. I was willing to say, look, I don't know what your struggle is like. Could you please explain it to me? Because I've never met anyone that has gone through this before. Excuse me. And yeah, there's a lot of folks in our community that are older that are not as willing to bend. They're not as willing to see that there's different ways of doing things. I mean, we even talked about how us older millennials, when we first came onto the gay scene, we were just expected it to be a fuck fest. We were just supposed to go around sleeping with everybody. And I've come to find out that's not really the case. We didn't have to do that. We just felt compelled to. So I think that it's the younger generation. They're moving forward. They're holding each other up. They're doing a damn good job. It's us older ones that have got to start meeting them halfway.
I
see that.
Agree with that 100%. The vision that comes to mind is an episode of The Simpsons. The vision is Homer and Barney back when they're in high school and they're singing a song in their hairbrushes in the mirror. Grandpa Simpson comes in like, "What's this racket?" And they go, "It's called rock and roll, Dad. You wouldn't understand." He's like, "I used to be with it. And then they changed what it was. Now I'm no longer with it. And it'll happen to you." And I was gobsmacked because I was like, yeah, I get that happens in a TV show, but that's never going to happen to me. And then I tried to use TikTok for the first time and I was like, oh God, I don't immediately have a concept of how this technology works.
Yeah.
Oh God, I think I'm old.
Yes.
Do you know how long it took me to finally download Snapchat and I don't even use it?
Oh,
I don't understand this thing.
Stop it, honestly. Like it's terrifying because you for the first time kind of look around and go, holy shit, the world is happening and I'm not with it. Don't get me wrong, I love a meme and I love a joke from 10 years ago when I was in high school because that shit's still funny to me. But then I realized there's a whole new slew of memes. There's all this stuff happening and I don't know what it is. I have to find younger friends and be like, what is this? How?
Yeah.
But you actually touched on that, Tim, and you really hit the nail on the head. You said you didn't understand those things until you made friends with those people.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the best things we can do in this community. Within gainer culture, there are transgendered people and there are people who would be considered Gen Z. There are also people who would be considered baby boomers, probably.
I'm sure there's a few.
Every designation. And when we sit around and we go, oh, I don't understand and I don't understand this and we could never. Take that moment, and think to yourself, do you actually want to know? Do you want to have that informed view? Here's a hint, your answer should be yes. Take that moment and go, why don't I know about this? Look at your friend circle. Oh, I don't have a trans friend. I should probably change that. Go looking, not to put it out there, go looking and meet with people who are transgendered and become friends with them and get comfortably friendly with them before you ask questions, because otherwise that can be a bit weird.
Yeah, you don't want to just go up and start saying, oh, well, what about this? Yeah, you don't want to do that. Yeah, and like, interestingly enough, the transgendered friends that I have, I didn't go looking for, they found me. You know, so it was like I was just out one night, struck up a conversation because they happened to be standing next to me, or they said, hey, can I buy you a drink? You know, because it's like one of those crazy evenings or whatever. So yeah, but being receptive, that was the thing. I had to be receptive to meeting people that that weren't currently in my, you know, circle of friends.
Absolutely. I think that's pretty much it. How do we best lift up ourselves and other people? By being open and by receiving opportunities when they come to us, by listening to people. And when you are in that right place, and you know when you're in that right place, asking to hear their story, asking to hear that experience with them and sharing that moment with them, realizing that we're all human, humanizing each other, and maybe things will be a little bit more chill, you know?
Yeah.
Feel that. Now, Dino, you and I talked about this once. You have a bit of an issue with the homosexuals who fetishize the straight men's.
Yeah, I mean, issue is strong because, like, it is such a big fetish. It is such like a mainstream fetish. I mean, it's on the list of like easily top 5 Googled gay porn things, straight boys. And you have to ask yourself, like, why? And also, is that okay?
Yeah.
Because, okay, first of all, why? I think a lot of fetishes like trigger or start to become realized a lot younger than a lot of people want to admit. Like, maybe sometimes uncomfortably young, but that's just how the human mind works. We're curious, we look, we learn, and we smell and taste if those things come into play as well, you know? And I think a lot of boys' first feelings for another boy, most of the time they're a straight boy, and most of the time they're a masculine straight boy, I guess. But that just it's like a strange catch-22. For me personally, if I can't respect someone else's sexuality, even if that sexuality is straight, then how do I expect them to respect mine? And I sort of use that as kind of like a base whenever I'm speaking to a straight guy, and I sort of just lay it out very plainly so that they can get comfortable with me. So that there isn't this, because a lot of straight boys fear that shit. A lot of them become crazy uncomfortable about the idea of a gay person near them, because obviously they'll find them attractive, and it's stupid assumptions all the time and all of that. But it's not that I have an issue, it's that I have an issue when there's effort put into hitting on a straight man, when there's thought behind it. I once had this roommate in Melbourne. He was literally a nightmare person, like pure garbage qualities as a person. I won't go into that, but he also was obsessed with straight boys, and specifically straight bodybuilders. And I'd see like long chats he'd show me of just him like pestering these boys, and he thinks he's making progress, and it came off to me very cringy, very like throwing us back so many years, because I think of myself as a gay representative every time I speak to non-gays.
Yeah.
And you don't have to live your life that way. I'm not saying this is the correct way to do it. It's just how I fit myself in. And I think when I do, you know, in like, what's the word? Whatever. When I do get involved with straight people, and when they do learn to love me and I learn to love them, it's like a one-up for gays. It's like, oh, so now that person's gonna go off, not have any judgments, maybe have some kids, throw those non-judgments onto their own kids, and it's a chain, and it's how we change the world. And I think even if like there's toxic masculinity, we need to not fight that with toxic. We can't. It will just never work. You need at least my method is inject myself into the situation and fucking change shit up like a vaccine. Like that's literally how I see it.
We are pro-vaccine here on the podcast for anyone listening. So, I mean, Tim.
I was just going to say, so my history with heterosexual men has been very strange. I've had a very strange history with heterosexual men. I've never slept with a heterosexual guy. I've never tried to, because I understand that when they're like, I'm a straight man, I'm like, oh, okay, well, the end of I mean, not end of conversations that I can't talk to you, but like I would obviously then not even try to flirt with you because I know it wouldn't be reciprocated. And funny enough, so like everywhere that I've ever worked, I'm usually the token gay.
Yeah.
Like, so I get that token factor. And then like the heterosexual men that I'll work with, once they realize I'm not a threat to them, like I'm not going to be hitting on them, I'm not going to be like making suggestive statements or trying to play coy or any of that bullshit, because I'm just a straightforward human being. Yeah. Then all of a sudden I'm like their best friend. And like, they want to tell me everything. Sometimes they overshare, and then they start to flirt with me. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Like, I would say like straight guys are so weird, because they would just flat out hit on me. Like, and even one guy that I was friends with from a work situation that we weren't working together anymore, he sends me an unsolicited dick pic. And I'm like, did you intend to send this to me? He's like, well, I know you like it. I'm like, oh, what the fuck? And then, this one guy that I was working with, and I will admit, like, I look at any man and judge him aesthetically. Yes. Like, is he good looking? I will do that with any man, regardless of what his sexuality is. And there was a guy I was working with who was a very good looking guy. And I always thought, damn, if only he was gay. But so then, I'm standing at the nurse's station, and he comes over and he's like, I'm going to a gay bar for the first time tonight. And I'm like, okay, good for you. Like, why do I care? Yeah. And he's like, are you going to go out tonight? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I work in the morning. It wouldn't really be a great idea to like go out and get hammered or anything. He's like, well, if you come to the bar, drinks are on me. And I'm like, okay. And he walked away, and I look at the other nurse standing next to me. I'm like, did he just flirt with me? Like, what happened there?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, dude, he was totally flirting with you. I'm like, but he said that he was straight. It's weird. I've had a very weird, complicated relationship with straight men.
Like, I completely understand. And it's not even weird, really, because like there is this, I've already sort of said it before, but there is a gay airness about really laddish behavior. The more blokey it is, the more you kind of a bit of slap and tickle, a bit of laugh on the side. Like, it is very that, and even in America, obviously, like fraternities, jocks, that whole culture is very like homoerotic.
Yeah, you can join our frat if you suck all 18 of our dicks.
Yeah. First one to come, it's a homo. Like,
I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Like, when a straight guy walks up to me and tweaks my nipple, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's weird. It's flanter. It's like when no one's actually gay and there's no threat of gay stuff actually going down, it's just all, it's a weird one. It's a weird one.
In many ways, I often think back to a phrase I heard years ago, that the reason why straight men are afraid of gay men is they're afraid of us treating them like the way that they treat women.
Boom.
Which is very much about real. And, they think we're going to be the ones to slip a date rate drug into their drink. They think we're the ones that's going to get them hammered and high just so we can lure them back to our sex dungeon and, force ourselves on them with a very unfavorable word, and that they would walk away feeling so used and broken and battered as the result of it. Like, it's
who has that kind of time,
right? They're like they truly believe that there is so much going into that. like
if you've got that much time on your hands, do something else. Like,
literally.
I mean, and look, that's not to say that those things don't happen. I'm pretty sure, like,
oh yeah,
prolific, gay rapist in history was from Manchester.
Yep.
Didn't he get caught, like, in, I think it was 2017? He'd done this to over 150 men.
Yeah, like videos of him with a knife and fork, just literally, it was crazy.
All sorts of fucking weirdness, bullshit. So listen, we're not exactly absolved of the potential of there being problems.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a note to anyone who might at any point be considered part of a minority. Your minority status in one department does not absolve you of being problematic in every other department. Just because you are gay does not mean you are not a racist. Just because you are a transgendered individual does not mean that you are not homophobic. Whatever your minority status may be, great, good, own that. But also make sure you look at every other community around you. Make sure you are working on yourself and
being self-aware. Yes.
So listen, when it comes to straight men, and yes, there's that aspect, I think, where maybe that's where that comes from. They are fearful of us treating them the way that they treat women. I think when they become comfortable is when they understand that an engagement with another person doesn't have to be that. You can engage with someone who you are, I guess, sexually compatible with by the argument that you're a male and I'm a male and you're gay, therefore we could theoretically have sex, but we're not going to, because we don't need to have sex in order for us to have a good time together. Like, any amount of gay friends that don't have sex, it's just because they're wrong as people, and then you have a good time together and everything's fine.
See, I feel like that puts me in a problematic category because I've had sex with most of my friends.
There's nothing wrong with that. I get annoyed because I've had sex with friends where they're always like, it's not going to get weird, and then it gets weird. And I'm like,
of course, because they have to preface it by like, oh, trust me, it won't be weird. I'm like, well, now that you've said it,
it's going to be. Like, if you know it's not going to be weird, just suck a dick and move the fuck along. If you know it's going to be weird, don't do it. Why would you do that? I want to kind of throw it back a little bit with something you said before, Dino. When guys are very actively pursuing and putting something out there towards straight men. We commented on this a few episodes ago. There are various men on YouTube who gainers have obsessed with over the years because of their weight gain. Characters like Simo from Australia, Tom Scar, the famous YouTuber, big fluctuations with his weight. And as I've always said, on the quiet, in the privacy of your own bedroom, if you want to watch that content and jack yourself to oblivion, go right fucking ahead. But there is a massive problem with gainers in the community writing comments on their videos for them and everyone else to see, saying, oh my God, you've gotten so fat, that's so hot, I want you to get even bigger, oh my God. Because Tom Scar made a video not too long ago about the fact that he thinks gainers are disgusting human beings who are fucked in the head. And I can't fault him for that, because as a community, that's what we've shown him. That's horrible. That has set us back because people were there with dicks in hand, having no concern for the other people around them. And that shit is not fucking cool. So listen, to people listening, please, like, I don't know what to tell you. There is a whole website called Grommr where there are people getting fat, getting muscular, doing what they want to do, looking for the attention. Go and give them the fucking attention. Why do you have to?
Why waste it? Yeah.
Someone who, one, doesn't care, and two, isn't asking for it. There is something very predatory about pursuing people in that kind of a way. I don't think it's cool. I don't like it. Please, let's, as a community, make a commitment to like step away from those.
Yeah. And like I said, I hold myself like I'm a rep when I'm the token, because it is, whether you like it or not, how people they will use you as a reference in their brain the next time they see a gay person. And all these gainers put in comments on like Tom Scar's videos. Not only did it expose Tom to the gaining world, so they basically reared their head, but they didn't rear a very nice head. They reared a very ugly head. And that's why he now is going out in the world saying, this is my experience I had with this tiny little subculture you've probably never heard of. They're going to probably share the experience with him because of it. And like it's a bit of responsibility you have to take when you're putting yourself out there. It just is.
You notice that a lot of the guys that we're talking about, like say Simo and a few others like PJ James and they're all like bodybuilders. Drew Manning, bodybuilders, that they either do some kind of social experiment where they want to gain weight and see if they can lose it, or they just happen to be gaining weight and they decide to lean into it for monetary purposes. It's like all these guys are bodybuilders. And I think I just got bored with that right away, because it's like, I will admit, when PJ James started doing it, I found him hot. And the first time that Drew Manning did it, I found it hot. But then it just became a gimmick. It was like every bodybuilder that was frustrated with not being able to get attention for being muscular, it was like, well, if I can't get it for being muscular, I'll get it for being chubby, and I'll make money off of it. And it's like, why? It just got so repetitive and boring and uninteresting. Well, and I know that there's a group of them right now that are doing it, like on Patreon. There's like 3 of them that are getting money for just gaining weight.
I'm putting it out there. I've seen the figures. It's looking like more than $2,000 a month of our gay dollars going to heterosexuals.
Yeah, literally that.
And I don't know, give it to me. Like, a faggot like me, give me your gay dollars, please. Oh my god.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I know what you mean by it got boring. It's almost like watching a meme or a TikTok video or whatever, and the moment you realize it's actually fake and it's really bad acting, it's never funny.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like that. You can feel the falseness, so it's just not sexy.
100%. And, you can almost look at the transformation process of how it progressed from those characters who were bodybuilders and then decided to get a bit chubby because it got that kind of response online, progressing all the way to the mukbang era with guys like Nikocado Avocado, who are just straight up getting fat. And it's this parody of humanity where every episode there's crying and he's taking videos at awful angles to show off how disgustingly fat he is. And
that boy really needs some tips on like camera angles and flattering photography.
Possibly like a psychiatrist. Like I honestly
well, that probably too. Probably
that too. But look, to bring it back a little bit, Dino, you first touched on it a bit, I think, with toxic masculinity. It is obviously a hot topic at the moment. What are some of the most common areas you observe that?
Oh my. I mean, like I said before, I've always found myself in mask situations. I was the manager of bookmakers for 2 years, and that's if you don't know, I think they're just probably a different name in America. It would be like a gambling shop. You would go, you'd put bets on horses and on football and sports and stuff, and it's a man environment. Like, the guys that go there are like super old school, old men, the types that are like hiding from their wives inside the walls, putting on bets. And I would be the type, definitely, to just come out to them straight away, not even second thinking it, and feeling the backlash, feeling the toxic masculinity. And it all just sort of stems from shame, uncomfortability, just these men that are like hot wired to see anyone taking on a role that even represents what a woman's role would be as less less worthy. It stems from like just thick hatred of women, basically. That's where I honestly think it comes from. It comes from this idea that if you're not being a man, which is whatever a woman is not, then you're not doing life right. And the way that I've never really let it get to me, but I can see so many people's lives where it does affect. And I've always been the advocate for like being the loudmouth, standing up for my very flamboyant friends whilst we're waltzing home drunk and some stupid drunk bloke shouts out something homophobic. I'm always the first to open my mouth and get up in his face, because no matter how masculine someone is, it doesn't scare me. Like, I've fully, without sounding too conceited, I've fully like met a bunch of straight guys and just alphaed the fuck out of them all and became the alpha of the group and shook dynamics up like that. And they can't really handle it because it's being sure of yourself is a quote unquote masculine aspect to someone. This kind of dominance, assertive, and being able to harness that is how I've combated most toxic masculinity in my life.
I like that, because I think really the next question I was going to ask is how do we begin to unpick toxic masculinity? Because surely the concept of masculinity itself is not toxic. Surely aspects that lend itself to the construct of manhood aren't intrinsically toxic, but obviously there's all of that sense of being problematic that comes along with it. How do we unpack that? Tim, I'm curious to hear from you, because as you say, you're an older millennial, you've seen more of the bar scene in America. Like, what have been your experiences with all this stuff?
I mean, here in the US, toxic masculinity is rife. I mean, it's just abound. And I've seen it in workplaces, social settings, bar scenes, the mall. I've seen it everywhere. And it's because you had said that masculinity is not inherently toxic. I do think there is a type of virtuous masculinity. I think that there is a type of man that, can be supportive, uplifting, can be a protector without being patronizing. It's and interestingly enough, like in the LGBTQ scene, as far as the toxic masculinity that I've personally witnessed, it's like in the bar scene, they're not so much like if straight women come into the bar, they usually become the token for the evening. It's like, oh, the straight girls are here. They're having a bachelorette party, or they want to go see a drag show for the first time. So they don't usually have anything bad happen to them. But, the toxic masculinity factor, like when there's transgendered people within the bar, and that probably leans more into transphobia. But it's just like, especially in the workplace, like before I became a nurse, after I became a nurse, I saw a toxic masculinity all the time, and just, and even some that was sort of inadvertently directed at myself. It's like a kind of reverse toxic. I don't know how to articulate this, but it was almost like because I was the man in a mostly female work environment, I was the workhorse. It was like, oh, well, make Tim do it. He's a man. He's strong. He can do that. Yeah. And it was like, no, it's just, I don't want to be taken advantage of because I'm the only guy. But it's a weird world out there. I'm kind of floundering here because I started with one point and now I've come to another one.
Do you know this is the point of these episodes and the point of these talks? What are we talking about? We're talking about a concept so large, it is representative of roughly 50% of the entire world's population. Yeah. Where do we see this the most? Anywhere we see men. How do we combat it? God only knows what.
I mean, because it's systemic. It's baked in.
Yeah. I have a crazy theory that World War II really fucked up the Western world's ideology. I think it set them back. I think it tweaked them. I think it because like it sounds like nothing, but a lot of the comments that Hitler used to make about British people was that they were flancy and fruity. And I think this kind of shit actually affected the British people, and they started to have this resentment against femininity and gayness. And just by fighting the war, they were already admitting that they were on the side of homos, because Hitler was also killing all the gays. So it was this catch-22. The people didn't know what to do. They also buckled down and started to act like a collective more, because that's how a country needs to win a war, by working together. So it changed everyone's mentality. It's where I truly believe the normie was sort of invented, the kind of cookie cutter molded life that is expected of everyone.
I would say that that's very true for the United States, but I often wonder if maybe for the UK, if it goes back even further to the Victorian era.
Oh yeah.
Because that's sort of where like the Victorian ideals for a man was upstanding, stalwart, stiff upper lip, no shows of emotion, well and ordered gentlemen. And women, like in the Victorian era, this was the era where women were communicating with hand fans and were having fainting couches and needed smelling salts and were getting the vapors and shit like that. So I kind of,
even the concept of bodies, even then, because back in those eras, to be fat was the preferred thing to be, because it was kind of wealth. To be thin was to be weak because you were underfed, and I think all of this history shows us that constructs we lend towards gender and weight are completely up for interpretation, and they seem to be driven by whoever holds the power stick at that point in human history. To touch back a little bit on what you said, Dino, I very much feel that, because I can't remember where this idea came from with regards to Hitler, but I believe the idea was half the reason he succeeded in terms of power was because he united people based on the idea of hating Jewish, because he said, all the problems you see around you, it's not our fault, it's their fault. He was one of the first people who really drew a plan on how to unite people, and it was about painting a common enemy. And we see that everywhere we look now. If you look through war films, like at that point in time, every enemy was German or somewhere there near Russia. If you looked at the enemies through the 70s and 80s, they were somewhere in the Southeast Asia, but clearly Vietnamese. Now, everyone's from the Middle East. Where in the Middle East? Probably Iraq, but we'll never say the name because it's all to do with this, that, and the other. We're always painting someone else as the common enemy. And I often wonder if we need to look at that for ourselves. Maybe the common enemy is the common man. Maybe the common enemy is the fact that we're not all meant to be common. Maybe we actually all are brilliantly unique. And the only thing that makes us all common and the same is the fact that we're different and unique. And maybe that's where we need to be approaching it from. And I don't know how that looks. I don't know what that first step needs to be. But I know for myself, I've said this a few times, when I came out of the church and stopped being a Christian, I had some extremely sexist and homophobic views, which went unchallenged because I belonged to a church that supported those views.
Yep.
I had no reason to think differently. Leaving that church, meeting people who thought and felt differently, challenged me to think differently. And I had to actually ask myself, do I believe this because I believe it? Or do I believe this because somewhere along the way, someone told me something and I never thought to question why? And so I try to do that now when it comes to being anti-racist and probing those things within myself. I try to do that with regards to, again, the sexism and even internalized homophobia. I don't think enough of us probe that for those who also 100. We need to do more of it. But I think that is step one, is actually to look at ourselves and just do an audit. Just pull everything out and go, listen, mate, let's start with the letter A for Apple. What do I think? Is this coded in some kind of bullshit? Do I need to think differently and just take the time? And I don't know. I feel like some people are very hesitant to do that. And I don't know why, because I would think, wouldn't you want to be the best version of yourself? Don't you want to if you really think you're the baddest dude, the fucking alpha, wouldn't the fucking alpha know his shit? I don't know. That's how
100%. I totally see that. I see that.
Oh.
Yeah, I think we could all do with a bit more self-awareness. I think knowing who you are and what you stand for and what makes you feel what is very important to being able to translate that to others and just actually have a conversation, because I think a lot of people are scared to be themselves, but also scared to listen. And I just think I've heard some god awful things from some of these straight boys that I speak to, and I've definitely thought to myself, oh my God, if I was amongst my queer peers, I would be shook and let them have it. But instead, I will come at them back with something twice as disgusting or revolting from a queer perspective, which isn't difficult because all you have to do is say, give me a black eye with your dick, and they're all giddy. And and speak their language and then flip and reverse it and teach them something. My God, it sounds so pretentious, but I genuinely do love teaching these clueless straight boys about queer culture. I find it so interesting to just sort of educate and to be able to express that in a way that they're gonna laugh and remember and, you know, pass on.
Sometimes people don't need like to be picket fenced. Sometimes they don't need to be protested and yelled at and, you know, have fists flying. Sometimes you just need to sit someone down and just be like,
and relate to them, show them that even though there are these differences, there can still be relatable shit between us, because that's when that's how you make friends, that's how you make connections. You both say yeah at the same time, you know.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. Dino,
thank you. It's been awesome.
Thank you for joining us. Where can people find you?
Sugoiboi on Grommr. It's been awesome.
But listen, that's it here for another episode on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave a good review. As always, you can find me on Grommr and Instagram at stannnum, and Twitter and YouTube at stannnum.bsky.
And you can find me on Grommr as Orpheus. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter as thiccradio. And of course, you can find more of what we've talked about today on Instagram and Patreon at Thicc Radio. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
See ya.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stannnum and Dino.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Body by Cream.